Welcome to our deep dive into George Eliot's Middlemarch.
Okay.
It's a book that's as rich and layered as a Victorian fruitcake. And trust me, just as satisfying to unpack.
I like that.
You're looking for a deep understanding of the novel, and we're going to explore its themes,
Yeah.
characters, and even what Eliot herself might have been trying to tell us about life, love, and ambition.
Middlemarch is often called a study of provincial life, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
Ellie gives us this intricate web of interconnected lives, and through them, she explores universal truths about human nature that resonate just as strongly today as they did in the 19th century.
And it's funny, because when I first picked up Middlemarch, I thought, okay, got a big Victorian novel. This is going to be dense.
Right.
But I was hooked from the very first page.
Hmm.
Eliot has this way of drawing you into the lives of her characters, making you feel like you're right there in Middlemarch, sipping tea and gossiping with them.
That's the magic of Eliot's realism. She doesn't shy away from the complexities of human nature. Her characters are flawed, ambitious, sometimes even downright frustrating, but they're always compelling.
Yeah.
Let's start with Dorothea Brooke, a character who embodies both the idealism and the limitations of her time.
Dorothea. Oh, Dorothea. She's like this bright flame yearning for something more than the conventional life laid out for women in Victorian society. She craves knowledge, purpose, a chance to make a real difference in the world. But she's surrounded by people who either dismiss her aspirations
Right.
or try to fit her into a neat little box.
She reminds me of so many young people today, full of passion and a desire to change the world, but often feeling stifled by societal expectations or a lack of opportunity. Dorothea's first marriage to Mr. Casaubon is a perfect example of how her idealism can lead her astray.
Oh, Mr. Casaubon, the epitome of dry scholarship.
Yeah.
I can just picture him now buried in his dusty books,
Yeah.
completely oblivious to Dorothea's youthful energy and yearning for connection. It's no wonder their marriage is a recipe for disaster.
It's a classic case of idealizing someone, seeing in them what you want to see rather than who they truly are.
Right.
Dorothea puts Casaubon on this pedestal, believing he'll be her intellectual guide, but he turns out to be more of a dusty old tome than a guiding light.
It's like she's trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And speaking of mismatches, there's Dorothea's initial judgment of Will Ladislaw. She dismisses him as frivolous, too caught up in the aesthetic side of life. But we as readers see that he has a depth and passion that Casaubon completely lacks.
That's one of the brilliant things about Eliot's writing. She gives us these multiple perspectives, allowing us to see beyond the surface judgments of her characters and recognize the complexities beneath. Will, with his artistic sensibilities and reformist ideals, represents a kind of freedom that Dorothea longs for but doesn't fully understand at first.
He's a challenge to her worldview, and it's through that challenge that she begins to question her own assumptions. Now, one detail that always struck me about Dorothea is her decision to keep her beautiful jewelry, even though she criticizes materialism. Remember that scene where she describes them as fountains of pure color?
That's such a fascinating detail. It reveals a sensuality and appreciation for beauty that we might not expect from this seemingly austere character.
Yeah.
It suggests that even the most idealistic individuals have these hidden depths, these desires that might contradict their professed beliefs.
It's a reminder that we're all complex beings, a mix of light and shadow, and that trying to fit ourselves or others into neat categories is ultimately an exercise in futility. And on that note of complexity, let's shift our focus to Tertius Lydgate, another character whose ambitions are both fueled and constrained by the society he inhabits.
Lydgate is fascinating because he represents the clash between progress and tradition. He arrives in Middlemarch with these grand ideas about modern medicine, determined to bring scientific advancements to this sleepy provincial town. But he quickly learns that change doesn't come easily, especially when it threatens the established order.
He's like a bull in a china shop, full of energy and idealism, but he underestimates the power of entrenched interests and social conventions.
He's also blinded by his attraction to Rosamond Vincy, who represents to him a world of elegance and social grace. He's captivated by her beauty, but overlooks the fact that their values and aspirations are fundamentally misaligned.
Rosamond. I have such complicated feelings about her. She's often portrayed as the villain of Lydgate's story.
Right.
But I see her as a product of her time, shaped by the limited options available to women in her social circle.
That's a really insightful point. Rosamond's ambition might manifest differently from Lydgate's, but it's no less real. She wants a life of comfort, security, and social standing, and she sees Lydgate as her ticket to that world. The tragedy is that neither of them fully understands the other's desires, leading to a marriage that becomes a source of mutual frustration and disappointment.
It's a classic tale of two people speaking different languages, unable to bridge the gap between their individual dreams and the realities of their shared life. But what's so brilliant about Eliot is that she doesn't simply present us with these individual struggles. She weaves them together into this intricate web of relationships, mirroring the complexities of real life.
The web is a perfect metaphor for Middlemarch. Every character is connected, their lives intertwined in ways they often don't even realize. Gossip becomes this powerful force, shaping reputations and influencing destinies.
It's like a game of social chess, with each move having unintended consequences that ripple outward, affecting the entire board. Remember the whispers about Bulstrode's shady past, or the way Lydgate's financial troubles become public knowledge?
Exactly. And through these interconnected stories, Eliot explores the themes of morality, ambition, and the often hypocritical nature of social judgment.
It's a reminder that we're all players in this grand human drama, and our actions, no matter how small, have the potential to affect those around us in profound ways.
You know, it's fascinating how Eliot uses these smaller characters, like Fred Vincy, to explore the theme of personal growth and the often circuitous path to finding one's purpose.
Fred is such a charming rogue at the beginning, isn't he? He's all about enjoying life, spending money he doesn't have, and relying on his family connections to bail him out.
He represents a certain type of youthful naivete, a belief that things will always work out in the end. But Eliot doesn't let him off the hook. She forces him to confront the consequences of his actions, to face the harsh realities of financial hardship and social disapproval.
It's like watching a butterfly emerge from its chrysalis.
Yeah.
Except in this case, it's more like a charming rogue transforming into a responsible adult. And his relationship with Mary Garth is such a key part of that transformation, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Mary, with her steadfastness, practicality, and strong moral compass, provides a much-needed anchor for Fred. She sees his potential even when he doubts himself, and her love for him is both challenging and supportive.
She's like the sturdy oak tree that he can lean on during the storms of life. And I love how their love story unfolds so gradually with these little moments of connection and understanding building up over time. It feels so authentic and earned.
It's a beautiful contrast to the more passionate but ultimately ill-fated love story of Dorothea and Casaubon. And speaking of ill-fated, we can't forget Bulstrode, a character who embodies the hypocrisy and moral corruption that Eliot critiques so masterfully.
Oh, Bulstrode. He's like a walking, talking embodiment of the dangers of self-righteousness. On the surface, he's all piety and good works.
Right.
But underneath, he's hiding this dark secret from his past. It's like a ticking time bomb just waiting to explode.
And explode it does. Eliot masterfully builds the tension around Bulstrode's secret, allowing the rumors and whispers to circulate through Middlemarch until the truth finally comes to light, bringing him down from his position of power and respectability.
It's a reminder that we can't escape the consequences of our actions, no matter how carefully we try to bury them. The past always has a way of catching up with us.
And the way Eliot portrays Bulstrode's internal struggle, his attempts to justify his actions and maintain his outward facade, is so psychologically astute. We see the corrosive effects of guilt and deceit eating away at him from the inside.
It makes you wonder how many Bulstrodes were lurking beneath the surface of Victorian society. All respectability and piety on the outside, but with these hidden skeletons in their closets.
Quite a few, I'd imagine. But what's so brilliant about Eliot is that she doesn't simply condemn Bulstrode. She presents him with a complexity that makes him both reprehensible and pitiable.
You almost feel sorry for him at times, caught in this web of his own making. And that brings us to one of the most striking aspects of Middlemarch, Eliot's masterful use of the web as a recurring motif.
The web imagery is everywhere in the novel, isn't it? It's this constant reminder of how interconnected our lives are, how our actions ripple outward, affecting not just ourselves, but those around us.
Remember that line where she talks about how our deeds determine us as much as we determine our deeds? It's such a powerful statement about the complex interplay between free will and circumstance.
It suggests that we're not just individuals acting in isolation. We're part of this intricate web of relationships, and our choices are shaped by the circumstances we find ourselves in, often as a result of choices made by others.
It's like a domino effect, with each action setting off a chain reaction that can have unintended and far-reaching consequences.
And Eliot uses this web imagery to connect seemingly disparate storylines, showing how the lives of her characters intersect in surprising and often dramatic ways. For example, think about how Lydgate's decision to treat Bulstrode's patient ultimately leads to his own downfall.
That's such a great example. His act of compassion of following his medical ethics ends up ensnaring him in Bulstrode's web of deceit and ultimately contributes to his social ruin. It's a powerful illustration of how even the best intentions can backfire when we're caught in a web of circumstances beyond our control.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key aspect of Middlemarch, Eliot's insightful social commentary. She wasn't just writing a novel, she was holding up a mirror to Victorian society, exposing its hypocrisies, its limitations, and the often devastating impact of social judgment.
Let's talk about that. What specific aspects of Victorian life does Eliot critique?
Well, one of the most prominent themes is the limited roles available to women. We see this most clearly in Dorothea's struggles to find a meaningful outlet for her intelligence and energy. She's constantly bumping up against societal expectations that dictate women should focus on marriage, domesticity, and social graces, not intellectual pursuits or professional ambitions.
It's like she's trapped in this gilded cage surrounded by beauty and privilege, but yearning for something more fulfilling.
Exactly. And remember Celia, she represents a more conventional path for women at the time, content with marriage, motherhood, and social engagements.
She loves her pretty clothes, her husband, and her babies, and she doesn't quite understand Dorothy's yearning for something more. It's interesting to see how Eliot presents both perspectives without passing judgment.
It is. She allows us to see the complexities of both choices, recognizing that there's no single right way for women to live their lives.
Right.
But she also subtly critiques the societal structures that limit their options.
And it's not just gender roles that Eliot tackles. She also takes aim at class structures and religious hypocrisy.
Indeed. The way characters like Bulstrode use their religious beliefs to justify their actions, or the way social standing dictates who is deemed worthy of respect, reveals a deeply flawed system.
It's like Eliot is peeling back the layers of respectability to expose the hypocrisy and self-interest lurking beneath.
Exactly. And remember Mr. Brooke? He represents a more comedic take on the shortcomings of the upper class.
Oh, Mr. Brooke. He's so well-meaning but utterly clueless about the real struggles of those less fortunate. His attempts at political reform are almost comical, but they reveal a deeper truth about the disconnect between good intentions and real impact.
Precisely. He symbolizes a certain type of privileged individual who dabbles in social causes without truly understanding the issues at stake.
It's that disconnect between intention and impact that Eliot highlights so brilliantly. And it makes you realize that even with the best of intentions, we can inadvertently contribute to systems of inequality or perpetuate harmful stereotypes.
Middlemarch is a novel that constantly challenges us to examine our own assumptions, our own biases, and to consider the wider impact of our choices, both individually and collectively.
And that's what makes it so relevant even today. We still grapple with issues of inequality, social mobility, and the often hypocritical nature of power structures.
Indeed. And Eliot's insights into human nature, her keen observations about ambition, love loss, and the search for meaning, transcend the specific context of Victorian England and speak to the universal human experience.
It's that timeless quality that makes Middlemarch such an enduring masterpiece. And with that, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this section.
We have, and we still got more to explore. But before we do, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've discussed so far. What stands out to you as particularly insightful or relevant to our lives today?
It's amazing how a book written over 150 years ago can still feel so relevant to our lives today. I think one of the things that struck me most is Eliot's ability to capture the complexities of human relationships. Her characters are so well developed, so flawed and relatable, that they feel like people we might actually know.
That's one of the hallmarks of great literature, isn't it? The ability to transcend time and place and speak to universal human experiences. And Eliot does that masterfully in Middlemarch. She shows us the messiness of life, the way our choices have unintended consequences, and the challenges of navigating relationships in a society that often imposes rigid expectations upon us.
I was particularly struck by the different ways Eliot portrays love.
Oh, yeah.
We have the idealistic but ultimately disappointing love between Dorothea and Casaubon, the more pragmatic but ultimately fulfilling love between Fred and Mary, and the passionate but destructive love triangle involving Lydgate, Rosamond, and Will.
It's like she's giving us a spectrum of love, exploring its various forms and the challenges inherent in each. And through these different love stories, she reveals a lot about her characters' individual values and aspirations.
And about the societal pressures that shape those aspirations. I mean, Dorothea's yearning for intellectual fulfillment is so at odds with what's expected of women in her time. And Lydgate's ambition is both fueled and constrained by the social circles he navigates.
It's that interplay between individual desire and societal constraint that makes Middlemarch so fascinating. Eliot shows us how these external forces shape our choices, even as we strive for autonomy and self-realization.
And that's where the life lessons come in. Right? I mean, Middlemarch isn't just a great story. It's also a profound meditation on how to live a meaningful life.
Exactly. And one of the key lessons that resonated with me is the importance of embracing complexity. Eliot reminds us that life is rarely black and white. Her characters are full of contradictions, their choices often misguided, but it's through those imperfections that we come to understand them and ultimately ourselves.
It's like she's saying, don't judge too quickly. There's always more to the story than meets the eye. And that's such a valuable lesson for us today in a world that often seems obsessed with quick judgments and easy answers.
Another lesson that really struck me is the danger of idealizing others. We see this so clearly in Dorothea's relationship with Casaubon. She puts him on this pedestal, projecting onto him all her hopes for intellectual fulfillment. But she ignores the warning signs, the fundamental incompatibility between their personalities and desires.
It's a reminder that we need to see people for who they are, not who we want them to be.
Yeah.
And that applies to romantic relationships, friendships, even our relationships with mentors or role models.
Yeah.
We can admire people's qualities without losing sight of their flaws.
Absolutely. And I think that connects to another important lesson, that the need to find fulfillment from within rather than seeking validation from external sources. Dorothea ultimately finds happiness not through marriage or social recognition, but through pursuing her own passions and using her wealth to help others.
It's a reminder that true happiness comes from living in alignment with our values and using our unique talents to make a positive impact on the world.
And that brings me to another lesson that resonates deeply in our current social media-driven culture: the importance of being wary of social judgment. We see throughout Middlemarch how gossip and reputation can make or break a person, especially in a small, tightly knit community.
The way Lydgate's reputation is tarnished by rumors and financial troubles, even though he's a genuinely good person at heart, is a cautionary tale about the power of perception and the often unforgiving nature of social scrutiny.
It's a reminder that we need to be discerning about the information we consume and the judgments we form. And perhaps more importantly, it's a call for compassion and empathy in the face of human fallibility.
And finally, I think Middlemarch teaches us the importance of recognizing the interconnectedness of our lives. Eliot's web imagery is a constant reminder that our actions have ripple effects, that we're all part of a larger social fabric.
That's such a powerful message, especially in a world that often feels increasingly fragmented and individualistic.
Yeah.
Eliot reminds us that we're not isolated beings, that our choices have consequences not just for ourselves, but for those around us.
It's a call to act with awareness, compassion, and a sense of responsibility for the well-being of communities and the wider world.
I couldn't have put it better myself. Middlemarch is a book that stays with you long after you finish reading it. It prompts you to think differently about your own life, your relationships, and your place in the world.
It's a true masterpiece, and I freely recommend it to anyone who's looking for a book that will challenge, inspire, and stay with them long after they've turned the final page.
And with that, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into Middlemarch. It's been a pleasure exploring this rich and complex novel with you.
And for those of you listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Which character resonated with you the most? What life lessons did you take away from Middlemarch? Share your insights in the comments below. Until next time, happy reading.